Well, good morning and welcome to Primetime in the library. It's really my pleasure to introduce this particular session in the library. And as a reminder, Primetime is a year-long celebration of academic and experiential accomplishments of our faculty and our students and our staff. And this time and programming, to me, really reflects how Bethel thinks about education, that it's really holistic, that we learn among ourselves in terms of faculty and staff and students all together. We focus on research and study abroad experiences and all sorts of things. So this was the brainchild of the library, and it has really been a wonderful event for us on a regular basis. Anne asked me to announce next week's session as well, so you all know what's coming next, which is next Thursday. We have an Edmund Scholars presentation, so that's Brian Hyatt from the biology department. He'll be presenting what Anna Hugel said, and I'm going to read the title of their research because it's complicated. But I do remember Xenophus laevius from my biology days with Jim Reinhardt in 1980. So Xenophus is an African clawed frog. So their research is transient transgenesis to examine gene expression during lung development in Xenophus laevius. So Brian's real area of expertise is looking at lung development and looks at lung development within frog development, and did a really fascinating study for Edmund Scholar this summer. So next week, Thursday, December 6th, will be Brian Hyatt and a few said. Today, we're happy to have Erica Lehner from the Ask Office talking with us about working with multilingual students. Erica has a really interesting background, spent time with Billy Graham, and really 6 years in China with the university campus. And so Billy gave, no, not Billy Graham, Campus Crusade. Oh, I probably should be struck by lightning for mixing that up. Campus Crusade, and spent time working with students on a campus in China for a number of years, and really has joined the Ask Office to work with us in working with our multilingual learners better, helping them to succeed. So we're really interested in what you have to do this.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Would it be all right if I just open in prayer? Because this is Bethel. We can do that here. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today. Thank you for the faculty here at Bethel and their love of students. Thank you for their care for the multilingual students, Lord. Thank you for all the hard work and long hours they put in to try and help problem solve what's going on with language issues. And Lord, I ask that you would help this talk to just be a small piece in solving the problem and to smoothing the path for some of these multilingual students. We pray for wisdom for the faculty, and we pray for wisdom for the students as well. Would you, who are the God of all languages, give them the wisdom and ability to understand, read, write, and study in the English language. In Christ's name. All right. Well, as Deb said, I am Erica Lehner. I worked with Campus Crusade for Christ for 13 years. 6 of those years were in China. While I was there, I taught at a university in a large city, a large unnamed city. And now I work here in the Ask Office at Bethel. I work over in St. Paul at a place called the Hub Center for Lifelong Learning. And I have adult immigrants and refugees there that are anywhere between 25 years old, and I think my oldest student is 75. And then I also work over on St. Thomas's campus. They have a center called the ELS Center, and I administer a test there called the IELTS test. And people who want to work in an English-speaking country or study at an English-speaking university often have to take this test. So I give them an oral interview, and I score their essays, and it's very fascinating. I learn a lot about culture, which is one of the things I like the most about this job. A couple weeks ago when I was scoring a test there, I was interviewing a gal there, and I asked her a question about what kind of vehicle would she like to own. She said that she would like to own a Mini Cooper, but her father said she can't have one because they have a Mercedes-Benz collection, and the Mini Cooper wouldn't look good in the garage with the other car. Yes, very fascinating. And ironically, he didn't tell her it was because she's not allowed to drive in her country. It's because it wouldn't look good in the garage. So I acknowledge that there are vast differences between what our students are learning and the cultures they come from and the cultures you come from. And I applaud you for all the hard work that you do to try and bridge that gap. Some of these problems are not going to go away. We have this year, 2 years ago, that's 4 years ago. I'm not very good at math, that's why I do English. St. Paul Public Schools reported that 41% of their student body was comprised of multilingual students. These people are arriving at college now. Of people age 19 and under in Minnesota, 1 in 7 is a child of an immigrant. That's increasing. In the last 10 years, the U.S. ELL population has grown 65%. What's this mean for us? It means that we're really on the cusp of this problem. And so I think it's great that you've come here today. I think it's great that you're wrestling with these issues because it's not going to get any better or easier. So the sooner we jump on it now, the more tools you'll have in your tool belt for when your classes increase even more. Let me give you a quick snapshot of some of the issues these students are dealing with. There's kind of 3 main areas. Students that are multilingual might be lacking cultural capital. These would be experiences and knowledge that have shaped our community and our families. Let me give you an example from yesterday. Raise your hand if you have seen, read, know what Christianity Today is. Yeah, everybody. So I had a student come in yesterday, and her assignment was to write a book review of a book they had read in class and pretend that it was going to be published in Christianity Today or the New York Times. She had no idea what Christianity Today is. She can guess what New York Times is. It's a newspaper. But if you're not really aware of who reads Christianity Today, what kind of articles are in there, it's really hard to complete that assignment accurately and well. So that's a cultural thing that she was lacking. And just knowing that small piece helped a lot to figuring out what she needed to do for the assignment. Another area that our students are lacking is social capital. These are the social networks that you and I know about. We know where to go to get different kinds of help. We even know, we might not know where to go, but we might know that this is a kind of problem that there is help out there for. Some of our students, they might not know that they can get help on this because where they come from, this is just something that people rely on themselves to figure out. So they might be lacking social capital. And then the one that we're going to camp out on today is linguistic capital. And these are words and communication patterns that we're all used to here because most of us, I think, grew up in the U.S. Not all, but most of us. When we think linguistic capital, we're talking about academic language. And a lot of us might think academic language is the vocabulary that we're teaching in our class, the vocabulary that goes with our specific discipline. And that's true. That is one piece of academic language. But the other piece of academic language is the words that we use to connect those vocabulary words. This is an abstract, evolving set of words. Things like, even things like however, therefore, in conclusion. What do those words indicate? In our minds, they indicate an order. They tell us that these two things are being compared or contrasted, but they're abstract terms. It's really difficult to say, what does however mean? It's difficult to tell someone what it means without giving an example. And so these are the words that are often tripping up a lot of our students. And there's another part of this, and it's the figurative part. And I'll show you some examples of that. These are some examples of assignments that I've received from faculty here at Bethel, things that students were asked to do. Compare objects. If you're not sure what compare means or what compare looks like, it's hard to do that assignment. Suppose that the 20 grams of sugar blah, blah, blah. They're making a hypothetical argument here. You have to realize that this is not a real thing. You're imagining when this question starts out with suppose. Draw a graph. Graph is pretty easy. You know what a graph is. But a lot of cultures don't use graphs. A lot of them don't. They don't use maps. And so if you're not used to drawing a graph, you don't know the different kinds of graphs, you're not even sure where do you start with this. And then it says be sure to indicate the carrying capacity. Indicate, what does indicate mean? It means tell, but do I tell that on this axis? Do I tell it on that axis? Do I draw an arrow? Do I write about it in a paragraph below? What am I supposed to do with the word indicate? Compare and contrast. Objectively analyze and synthesize. What's the difference between analyze and synthesize? That's a hard one. Does this require a person to have one paragraph of analyzing and one paragraph of synthesizing? Do you do the analyzing and synthesizing all together? So these are the words on tests and assignments that are often asked about when students come into my office. Other times, people are asked to expand on the meaning of a word. For example, this assignment said, weave together Smith's ideas on Christianity and education. Weave together, weave isn't normally used in this sentence. Weaving is what I do on a loom with fabric. So if I'm supposed to write, how do I weave those words together? What does that mean? This is one of my favorite ones. There are no tricky words in here, but there's tone, there's intonation in this question. Write an essay titled, With Liberty and Justice for All, the Market Economy and the Christian Faith. So what you don't get is the background on here. The professor had given a little bit more information that indicated that perhaps there is not liberty and justice in a market economy, that it might be incompatible with the Christian faith. And so when you have that in your head and you read this, you realize that this first part of the question has a little bit of maybe sarcasm in it, a little bit of is it really possible to have liberty and justice? Is that possible and have a market economy and the Christian faith? So if you don't have that oral intonation going on in your head, you almost don't realize that he's pushing a button there. He's being sarcastic. Let me give you some applications, because I don't think it's hard to pick out these words. We can all take out our assignments for our students and say, oh yeah, these might be the hard words, but what do I do with that? How do I change that? Because really, my desire isn't for you to dumb down any of your assignments. Students need to be able to uphold the academic rigor of Bethel, and I also don't want to give you more work. So I realize that this isn't going to solve all of your problems, and I don't want to put more on your already full plate. But I'm hoping that this will be like a pair of glasses, so that when you pass out an assignment or when you're verbally discussing it with your students, you might know what might be tripping up those couple of multilingual students in your class. Or when they come to you and say, I'm totally confused, it might help you have a starting place of where to talk to. So my first idea is just read through your tests and assignments. Have an eye towards academic language. Ask yourself if you've provided models of how you expect things to be compared or analyzed or classified. Have a handout, a couple of handouts to pass out. One is a list of academic terms like analyze, classify, and it gives some examples of how those are used. This is something you could use in your classroom if you wanted to give a sample paragraph. You could point these words out. You could even photocopy this and give it to your students, because it helps to define some of the words you might be using in your assignments a little bit. There's also, the second thing there is a paragraph frame. Because a lot of students don't know, there should be two handouts. A lot of students don't know how to string these words together. So the paragraph frame is something you could do in your class if you wanted to give an example of a question. You give them a question, you could use the framework and use the vocabulary words from your discipline to write a sample paragraph so that they can see how to use these academic words to string things together. I think I should point out that while my hope is that this will help the multilingual students, this is just good teaching. There are mainstream students who have trouble writing in good quality academic writing. So this will help them as well. Hopefully the level of all your students' writing can go up as a result of this. The second point here is to scaffold and sequence assignments. Scaffold is a education-y sort of word. And in general, when people say you should scaffold assignment, they mean that you should, rather than give the whole assignment all at once, you should give it in small pieces that build upon each other. And I realize that's sometimes not possible. When I read this, I sometimes scaffold it when I'm sitting down with a student. So for example, here's an assignment that was sent to me. The student was told to read documents about critical reading that are found on the Moodle course site. Read 3 short articles about how to do critical reading. Read 1 document about how to write a critical analysis of a journal article. Choose 1 article from the list of articles to read and critique for your paper. Both summarize content and directly quote from the article. The text of your critical analysis must be a higher proportion of critical analysis than it is summary. This was really complicated. It took me a long time to figure out what the person was supposed to do. I am assuming that there was more verbal instruction with this. But what I would do when a student brings this to me, I split it up. And I say, okay, up to here, we're all reading. Do you have your documents? Take out your documents. What three articles did you choose? What are you reading? Bam, bam, bam. Okay, great. What document are you going to read about doing a critical analysis? Do you have that? Bam. Sometimes they don't even have this. We have to talk about where to get it. Or students will come in and they need to have some articles from the library and they don't have those. I send them away. Not away, but we talk through this and I say, come back next week, bring your articles, we're going to look at them together. So help them to see, okay, this is the first step, you need the articles. You can't do any writing until you have the articles, till you've read them. What are you going to pick out from your articles? And I help them find some of the main points. So this, if you were going to scaffold this in the classroom, the first week of an assignment, you might just have them read it and write a summary paragraph of each of these. That way they've got that step out of the way and they know what they're about before they start the bigger writing assignment. Then the next part they have to do is they need to choose an article from this particular list to read and critique. So pick the one. Pick your one key article. Which one are you going to do? All right. Summarize the content. Have them tell it to me. What's it about? Summarize it for me. I don't know. I haven't read it. Once they can do it verbally, it's a lot easier to get it on paper. What are some of your favorite quotes from the article? Underline them on the paper. Great. Do you know how to write a quote in a paragraph? Let's talk about that. Okay, now once you're all done, you need to make sure that the summary, just describing your article, is shorter than you're talking about the article. So why don't you go home and write it. I recommend putting the summary first and then talk about it, but you can do it any order you want. Bring it back to me. So they bring it back and then I pull out the assignment again. I said, let's look at the summary. Okay, look, yeah, this is this much. You're talking about it as this much. You're pretty good. Okay, check that. All right, now let's look at the critical analysis. Did you really critically analyze that? And what does it mean to critically analyze it? So that's a lot of what I do when I sit with a student. We break it down. We scaffold it into little pieces so they know what to do step by step. For some reason, this is just really hard for multilingual learners. They look at this paragraph and it's just overwhelming for them. Something about the language makes it difficult to put into little pieces. Our brains can do that because of the way we work with the English language. But it's a lot harder when you're operating in your second, your third, maybe even your fourth language. So this is really what helps them, and it will give you a better rough draft. There's still going to be some other problems in it, but this will at least get the format looking good. What are some other things you can do? You can use the academic language chart that I passed out to you to help teach the language that expresses academic thinking. Students haven't learned these words. We have to teach them. Consider using the paragraph frame as a way to give an example of good writing. Build on students' oral strengths. A lot of these students come from oral cultures. So if you can help them discuss assignments with peers, not even just say, you might say, turn with your partner and talk about the main points from class today. That's one aspect. But after giving out the assignment, give them a few minutes to read it and then say, turn with your partner and tell your partner what you think the assignment is supposed to be. Have them repeat back to you after they've read it to help them figure out, I'm not really sure that I do get it. And that might come out when they're talking with a partner. It might come out easier than if you just say from the front, does everybody understand it? It's really hard to be brave and say, every time, I still don't get it. The next week, yeah, I don't get it again. To be the one that's always raising your hand because you don't get it is really hard. So talking about it with a partner is a good way to figure out, yeah, I'm not getting this. And probably the native speaking partner might get it and be able to help them, which might save you office hours. If 7 and 8 are a little on the edge. So I recognize that you may or may not be able to do this. If you get a paper or an assignment and you realize that the misunderstanding that's resulted in a bad grade is a result of some academic language issues, not that they didn't study, not that they don't know the terms from your class, but they just didn't get the academic language of stringing things together, you might want to consider giving them a chance to redo the assignment for a certain percentage higher. Now, I'm talking if the student has failed. We're not talking they got a C, you can redo it and get a B or an A. I'm talking they've completely bombed it. If you redo it, you can pass. That's it. And I know there's some issues out there with that. You need to be fair with all students. So to do something like this, it might have to be a policy that's true for your whole class, and I recognize that that would make for more grading and just a more drawn-out process. I'm just putting it out there as a consider it, and maybe it'll even cause you to brainstorm some other solution that's better than this. You might want to consider making a visit to the ACT Center a required part of an assignment. Make them come in. Tell them, take this paper in, talk about it with the tutor, bring it back signed by that tutor, and you get 5 points. Or it's just I know a lot of faculty will break up their assignment. You get 10% for your bibliography, and you have 20% for hitting all these main points. And maybe 5% of the grade is, did you go sit down with an ACT Center tutor? It's something to consider. Maybe you wouldn't want to do that for every assignment. Possibly one of the beginning assignments in the semester would help that student realize, hey, we're not scary, and I got a good grade on this paper because I met with a tutor. And it might keep them coming back in all on their own. And that's about it. There are a few books up here. I don't recognize these, but the one that I took the bulk of this information from is this guy's Weirs. He is the K12 Guru on academic language. He has really great ideas, and he's got a great website. I think the website's on the bottom of one of those handouts. And it's a nice one to kind of fish around with when you have extra time in your schedule. Yes, questions?
One of our problems is that our multicultural students sit next to each other. So if they turn to somebody, usually a friend, they would be asking somebody who should have probably had their hand up already. So
turn to somebody you've never talked to before and talk about this.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But is there any way, do you ever suggest any science
You could do assigned seating, or you could be even more creative. I bet there are times when you have students in discussion groups in your class. So give the assignment while they're, and you might have a natural way of breaking them up, whether you number them off, whether you give them all a Tootsie Roll Pop that's a different color, and they have to sit with the people who have the same Tootsie Roll Pop as their color, and they do their little discussion together, and then while they're in the discussion group with the native speakers, then you pass out the assignment, and you have their discussion group that's already been discussing talk about what is this assignment? How do you understand it to be? And maybe that would help. But you could always assign seats too. I think it's at the college level it might be a little subtler if you have them already broken up in discussion groups and making sure that the pack is split up. What's your name? I know some faces, but I don't know a lot of names.
Tim.
Tim, nice to meet you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to add from the tech standpoint, I have seen students who come in who their formatting might be wrong because they have never used a word processing before,
Yes.
so feel free to send them over to us in the library because we sit down with people for half an hour or more just showing them basically, like some people even enter after every line because they maybe have just used a typewriter before, so it messed up their whole paper, and they may need just someone to sit with them, or they don't know how to indent on the second line or a hanging indent or things like that. So if it looks a little puzzling that way.
Input, very good input. Send them to the tech center.
On papers where there aren't ands used or the plural of words isn't used, and that just seems to be a consistent, it's almost how I know some seminars on don't point that out every time or just kind of allow that to go on. What do you recommend and how can you help turn that around?
There is a lot of discussion on that. In fact, I was just at a seminar about that very thing, and the answers are all over the board. Some people say, some studies say that you can point it out every time and tell it to them and it won't do any good. Others say it does help some. The key is helping bring it to their awareness. I think my perspective is there are times, because these students are going into professional fields, they need to have a grammatically professional, correct paper. They cannot go out into the world. It would be embarrassing for us as a university to say, yes, this person is ready to go into the professional world, and they cannot do that. So there are times when we do need to require them to do that, and we do need to say, this is unacceptable work. You need to take it back. I met one professor from the U of M who said when he gets papers like that, he tells the student, I am already giving you the grade, but I'm not going to tell you what it is until you turn in a professionally acceptable paper, go down to the tutoring center, and get it cleaned up. So he doesn't change their grade, but he makes them clean it up. And if they don't go clean it up, they get a 0. But I think there are other times when we need to be flexible. When a student is told to turn in 2 paragraphs reflecting about your experience of some such thing, it's not as critical. It's not as critical. So I think you need to find a balance for you, for your discipline, for your profession. When is it okay to have those? When does it need to be perfect? And then be willing to tolerate somewhat of an accent. We tolerate an accent in speaking. We need to be willing to consider there may be a little bit of an accent in writing. So consider that.
I would add to that, there's a difference between having, like my sister's dyslexic, for example, so she has a lot of spelling errors, and she says, well, does it matter that I correct my own writing, or does it matter that the writing is correct? And so do you want the student to be able to self-edit, or do you want the student to find resources? Because there's always people or resources who can edit your paper for you. So what matters to you? Is it that the student can spot and edit their own work, which, for all our students across the board. If we have a dyslexic student, it doesn't matter that they correct their own mistakes, it doesn't matter that the work is professional. And for a student to learn a skill of knowing where to seek help, is I think a fine goal. If you're like if you're teaching ESL, you have to be able to write English perfectly, then you need to be able to self-edit. So there's different situations where you might want to consider what skill you're trying to target for all these students.
Any other questions? Here and then back there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just another comment from the library too.
Sure.
And as we are assisting students, just in general, not just with maybe some kinds of issues, but just we've discovered that some assignment descriptions are just easier to figure out than others, and so often we're trying to help decipher what it is the student's actually trying to find or whatever, and so just kind of a plug for all the faculty to just, regardless of who's reading it. Sometimes if we're having trouble too, then we get a little embarrassed that we can't even figure out what it is the students really need to do. And so just kind of in general, clarity is good.
Clarity is good.
Well, this is just another librarian. I was just going to say that also sometimes we are able to help because we do understand the language. So if it's an issue or they need to find resources to support what they're doing, to feel free to send them a reference to us.
Yeah.
Because we're always trying to help with that. And sometimes we just call or email a professor ourselves and say, we're wondering what you're hoping they will find or where would you look.
Yeah. I notice a lot of students, when they have to do research, have a really hard time with Boolean searches and even figuring out what would be a key word I could use to find something. So in class, if you're expecting students to do research, you may want to even take a minute as a whole class and brainstorm what are keywords you could put into the computer to get some research articles.
Do you work with graduate students as well, or just undergrad?
I am just undergrad.
Okay. I know on at least 2 cases where graduate students have dropped out of the doctoral programs. They've gotten 1 or 2 masters, but they can't do the thesis because they have no structural ability to pull that thesis off.
I'm happy to work with graduate students when we have some funding for that.
Okay, sounds good. These are international students too. They come from overseas to try to get a doctorate here, and they can't do it.
Yes, and I would say there are often some differences between international students here versus, we would call them the 1.5 generation. The people who maybe came over, graduated from a high school. Some of them maybe were even born here, but English is not the first language in their home. Whereas the international students are fluent, literate, capable of doing research at least in one language. Our multilingual students are often not able to do that in any language. So there's some slight differences there.
In nursing, I think one of the issues that we come across too is with, like, say, our testing situations. And multiple choice questions, I know, are very difficult. But what about within, I know I've proctored exams, and a student may come up and say, I don't know what this word means. So, how much help can we give to students when it may be a simple term that isn't even related so much to the whole heart of the question, but it's something that they really need to know in order to be able to answer the question correctly.
Right. I think part of that depends on the seriousness of the test and the standardization level of the test. There may be some tests where you just can't say anything. In my classes, if it's a word they should know because it's vocabulary or it's been in the reading, I won't help them because they have to do their work. If it's a word that's somehow unrelated to that I think everybody else gets, then I will sometimes give a very brief, short help. Yeah.
A few years ago, I read an article that was a small study that showed in nursing, ELL learners could get into nursing program with 2 years of high-level English study, but it took 5 years of academic language to be successful to become a nurse. The other comment, I'm still looking for a venue to really allow a different style of writing. Based on my wife's experience in a preaching class at Bethel Seminary, she happened to come in a year where the teacher was 3 points and a poem. That was every sermon, you know, completely linear, blah, yada, 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 yada. But the class, there were 5 or 6 very experienced African-American preachers who had a structure to their sermons, but that was completely different than 3 points and a poem. And luckily the prof was smart enough to not shoehorn everybody into the mold. And you know, it ended up to be a marvelous learning experience for all involved. That they were allowed, the preachers were allowed to formulate the spoken essay based on a different rubric than what was normal. And again, you're right. You won't get a scientific article published with a different format like that. But and again, I can do it in small group discussions and in some settings. But I'd really like to expand on that and have all of us be more aware that our mold isn't the only mold.
I think that's a fabulous idea, and anytime you can give students a choice for different models, I think it's a great idea. There may be times when it's just not possible. I think of like social work or nursing where students are going to have to document certain things that they've done with patients or clients, and there's a preset state form where they have to write it this way, and in that case they're just going to have to do it that way. There are other disciplines where there's much more flexibility, and I think anytime you can show them different models, if there's one that speaks to them and they'll do well on, go for it. And then send those down to me, because I would love that research too. I think it'd be good to have a nice, just an ever-sharing community. If someone hits on something that works really well, let's share it, because this is something we all need to own, and God has given Bethel a great gift in these multilingual students. I mean, these are people that speak languages we don't speak, that are going into communities that we don't go, that can share the gospel, and I think that's great. Yeah.
I have one more question. I always think I'm clear, but then I'm really wordy and I'm not clear. And I get wordier as I try to clarify, and it just gets more and more confusing. So what do you suggest? How can we test how clear, I mean, should we pilot our instructions with our TAs, or what are some strategies for making sure we actually are clear? Because I feel like I'm super clear, but then later I go back and look at you were in that class. Yeah. I'm not clear in any way, shape, or form.
Use whatever strategy works for you. So if you want to pilot with your TAs, pilot it with the TAs. If you want to pilot with a peer, with a colleague, pilot it with a colleague. Pilot it with your husband. I tell my students to go home very sensitively. Some of them have teenage kids, and I say, okay, you know your kid knows how to fix these S problems. Just, yeah, be brave. Go read it out loud to your kid. Okay, I will. You know, whatever it takes. Find somebody who's, maybe someone who's even not in your class might be a better, you know, like a naked eye for looking at it. I don't know how strict we are with ending times. I'll take one last question, and then I think we probably have to wrap up.
Maybe just a comment. You mentioned multilingual, multicultural. Social class also frames language in a certain way that can be very challenging for both professors as well as students.
Yes.
So that's all I want to say.
I would agree. That is a sticky wicket as well. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming, and feel free to drop by the Ask Center or shoot me an email if you think of other questions. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.